everyone, welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, which I moved out of when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for 8 years and have 2 beautiful babies.
Yes, we do. And today we have a very special treat. We are very excited to welcome a guest on our channel today, Caroline. She is actually from the Mennonite group, and we are very excited to learn from her a little bit more about the Mennonites today.
Well, thanks for being here, Caroline.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I was so excited when you reached out and emailed us and we're sharing some of your story. And I was like, will you please come on so we can talk to you more? Because I have a million questions and it would take us like a year for me to email back and forth and have all my questions answered. So I really appreciate you being willing to come on and purely for my curiosity.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there just like us that have a lot of questions as well. So we're excited to learn more about you today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to answer questions and maybe disperse some stereotypes. So I'm so excited. I can't even tell you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's always funny how many stereotypes like people have without ever knowing anyone, right? And so it's always great when you have a chance. Or I know the FLDS are so mysterious, and then when Sam shares, it's like, oh, that's kind of how I grew up like this. So it's kind of how I grew up like that. So there's always more similarities, I think, between all religions than what people realize and until you're willing to talk about it.
I agree, definitely. And it's been amazing to see as well when we first put out a couple videos about or reviewing the Mennonite groups. We don't personally know that much other than just the reviews we've done or the little bit of research we have done. But a lot of our viewers have commented and emailed us and know a lot about these groups. So, it seems to be a pretty well-known community, the Mennonite communities. So I guess maybe I'm just learning a little bit later than I wish I knew more, but I'm excited to learn today.
Yeah, I will say it's not totally unusual. I feel like the Mennonite and Amish communities generally tend to be more populated in the Midwest. I spent a very small amount of time living in the southern region of the United States, and anytime I mentioned anything about Mennonite, they're like, well, what is that? And then I'd be like, oh, it's like Amish but different. And then they'd be like, what is Amish? And I'd be like, oh wow, this is like a learning curve for all of us. But yeah.
Wow.
I think a lot of people on the West Coast as well, like in Utah, there were a lot of people who wouldn't have known who the Amish or Mennonites were at all as well.
There's not very many around here in southern Utah and the Nevada area that I know of anyway. So
what I guess the first question would be is, what kind of Mennonite group did you grow up in? Because we have since learned after doing our video that there's a whole lot of different groups. Would you mind explaining and expanding just a little bit on what different groups there are and what group you were a part of?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different groups. There's what would be considered conservative Mennonite, which is generally speaking, women wear head coverings, men traditionally have beards. They wear a certain type of outfit. Then there's the, for lack of better term, normal Mennonite, secular. There's not really a term for it that I'm aware of, but basically women just wear normal clothes, jeans, patterns are allowed. And then I'm trying to think how to explain it, but then there's also beachy Mennonite, where they're less conservative in their clothing than super conservative Mennonite. But there is a little bit of a divide there. So, for example, in my community, off the top of my head, growing up, I think there were, at least 5 Mennonite churches. In my town alone that I can think of, and each one was just a little tiny bit different. So I know 2 off the top of my head, women wore head coverings. Usually it was a little black doily, kind of like what you would see. This is kind of careful, but on your grandmother's
The coffee table?
Others have that, yeah, like their dining room table or whatever. So they've had that on their head. More conservative women would have like a full blown bonnet. Not as popular though. And then less conservative Mennonite women would wear usually like a simple shirt with a skirt, usually like black was very popular, and then like tennis shoes, and then and then sometimes dresses. You see those actually in my area still. Like you'll see them going to, typical stores like Old Navy, Gap, Marshalls, whatever, because they still do kind of shop for normal clothes. That's like the more obvious differences I can think of. Theologically, all Mennonites and the Amish do kind of have similar backgrounds. So, for example, like Mennonites are Anabaptist, which is a type of Protestantism that emphasizes the personal choice of baptism. We do not believe in infant baptism or children being baptized super young. We believe it is a choice that a follower of Christ does, and we believe that based on the example of Christ, where he got baptized when he was about 30 years old, and he made that decision. No one made that for him. And so that's where that belief comes in.
The baptism. So can a child or a teenager ask to be baptized, or do they have to be 18 and be legally an adult to be able to make that decision?
Yeah, so younger kids can get baptized. I think it does kind of depend on the church and the community. I know that when I got baptized, I was actually on the younger side at the time. I was 11 when I made that decision. But nowadays, I would, at least in my church, even though we're not Mennonite anymore, so we didn't do this until I was older. But this current time frame, I am seeing children as young as like 9 getting baptized. Not super young though. And even when we do baptism, it's not as simple as saying, I want to get baptized, and then we go to a creek or a baptismal, whatever, and do it. We have classes that we go through just to explain the importance of baptism and what it means as a believer of Jesus Christ to be baptized. We see that as almost an initiation into the mission and starting your journey of being a part of the Great Commission of going out and spreading believers.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So just a quick question here before we get too far along. You mentioned the differences in the way they dress and that type of thing. So which did you grow up in a more traditional group? Did you wear the bonnet or the traditional type of clothes?
No. So, like I said, in my community, that was not uncommon, but at my specific church, that was already kind of dying out by the time I was going to the church. So with my own personal background, I guess one thing I do need to explain is there's kind of like Judaism, how there's a religious Judaism, and then there's Judaism as a heritage. Mennonite is similar in that a lot of people come from Dutch, Swiss, German backgrounds.
Okay.
And they've been Mennonite for generations. I was not that way. Our family joined the Mennonite church from a non-denominational church, actually, because we had friends at this church, loved the theology and the good people and how service oriented the church was. And I think honestly, that would have been like the whole head covering thing might have been something that would have scared my parents away if my mom was asked to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, growing up, that wasn't a thing. Only like really older ladies did it. And now, like in my church, I can't think of a single woman who has a head covering, actually.
I was going to ask as well, when you say that there was 5 Mennonite churches and they were all like just a little bit different, did you get to pick which one, or like people who are you born into it? I know you just said your family converted into it. A lot of the people, are they just kind of born into a certain sect, or is it like you get to choose, or do you see people transfer from one to another easily, or is it like once you've picked one, you kind of stay the course with that one?
So with that, it kind of depends on your family culture, which sounds weird, but it does kind of make sense. So in my church, a lot of the people are related. Like I sometimes joke, like going to church is literally a weekly family reunion because 35% of them are related.
Right.
So it's kind of funny there, but part of it is like you go where your family goes, but there is also an element of if you feel for whatever reason like you want to try a different church, you can go to a different church. The community in and of itself won't be upset. Your family might have personal stuff about that because they're like, well, you're going to a different church, but
right.
It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things to the majority of people. So you have options. If we had chosen to go to a different church, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. Actually, when our church was going through its transition, other churches in the area were also like going through similar issues at the time. And so we did see a lot of like flip-flopping and switching around of congregations, because we'd have like some people leave this church and then come to ours, or leave ours and go to theirs. So it's kind of funny because we just flip-flop for a while.
Gotcha. Wow. But you said a lot of the core doctrine is the same throughout the different branches, right? So it may just be the dress and like the things that you're allowed to do, kind of more the rules rather than the doctrine that are different between congregations. Is that right?
Yeah, dress, and then also very specific beliefs about very specific issues. Like even though there are core things that are the same, like how, okay, so a good example is like core doctrines that are the same, like Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He came, died, and rose again. You're going to find that the majority of those Mennonite churches, I would go and say all of them. What might be a little different is their approach to, like, say, the LGBT community, how they approach things like finances. The leadership might be different. Worship might look a little different. Like, some churches have better like musical worship than others in some people's opinion. So some people like look for that. You know, those little things that generally speaking people look for in looking for different churches.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's similar with through a lot of different Christian churches. You know, there are a lot of similar core doctrinal beliefs, but just a little bit different depending on the denomination that you attend. So that makes sense.
I always think that's so cool because growing up LDS, like you're assigned based on where you live. Oh. You're assigned a specific time at a specific building, and there is no mixing up. Like, other than if there's like a special event at somebody else's ward, like if a family member is speaking in their ward, then you can go and attend that. But like I couldn't regularly go attend a different ward. You'd actually get called in and not in trouble, but they'd be like, what's going on? You need to be, it's a very big thing that you need to be in your specific congregation based on your location. It's very important. And even as like the young single adult wards, when you're like from 18 to 29 and you go and you just have church with other singles, and even there, like that would happen all the time where people would try to go to church, even just with their friends, even though the entire church system itself was the exact same with every ward and was done the same. You would try to go with your friends and like you'd kind of get in trouble. Like everyone, you all need to be going to your own ward. You all need to be going based on wherever you were assigned. So the idea of getting to like go to different congregations and have it be different or be like, I like music, I want to go to that one. That sounds super fun to me.
Yeah. I find that so surprising. I can't imagine my church like being that controlling. My pastor, I can't even imagine him being like, is everything okay? Why did you go somewhere else? Like, just, I find that so interesting.
You mentioned pastor. So is that the leader of the congregation was referred to as a pastor?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. I was going to ask that. And in that place where you live, and there's these 5 different churches. If someone from another group was walking down the street and saw one from a different church, was it friendly? Was everyone really close friends and kind of agreed that, oh, it's all similar and it's pretty much the same doctrine, or how was that relationship between groups?
Oh yeah, like everything is super friendly. A lot of those people are extended family, like super extended, like think 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th cousins. So yeah, that's super friendly, or just like really good friends. I do live in a smaller community, so a lot of people are related, or a lot of people know each other through work and business. Right. So yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10, super friendly. No real big issues.
Good.
Yeah.
And really quick, kind of back to where we originally started talking about, were you told why it was, for those that believed in wearing the head covering and that, were you taught why that was asked of them or why it was important that they followed that rule?
Yeah. So if you look in scripture, I am blanking on the exact verses, but Paul does talk about how women need to cover their heads because they, the head of the household is the man, and then the man, the head of man is God. So like, it's all about how it's a respect to God and a respect to men. However, that is also kind of a, the kind of theological debate there is whether or not Paul was speaking from like a morality standpoint or from a cultural standpoint. Our personal conviction, from my understanding, and this is at least my conviction, was that had a lot more to do with the culture of the time and just respecting cultural norms, far more than like a moral thing. Like if a woman's head's uncovered, then she's like a disgrace to society or something. So, but some people, of course, do believe still that that is a priority and head covering is a morality thing. So, of course, I'm not going to shame a person for doing that or choosing that.
Yeah,
that makes
absolutely.
Sense. Yeah.
Thank you. We appreciate that because it's in a bunch of different groups that we've kind of started looking into or seen videos and stuff. It's interesting to find a lot of the women have head coverings, but every single group kind of has a different answer. I really like your answer. And it's really interesting to see like the comparisons to the answers of why they're told. Like which group was it? Maybe it was the Hutterites.
The Hutterites, I believe.
There was a group that when they were asked like in a documentary and she was like, I don't know. We just are told to do it. You know, it's like pure obedience. So it is cool that you got more of an answer than that there was actually a scriptural reason behind it. At least I'm the type of person where I'm always like, why? You
gotta have something backing the reason up, right?
Exactly. Well, and I'm always the type of person, especially when it came to theology, I always wanted to know the why. So I was the person who would search those answers out. Like, why does that matter? Does it really matter? And then, yeah.
So you said that your family found this specific group later and converted. How old were you for that? And what was that like for you?
Oh gosh, I was young. I was a year and a half, 2 years old when we made that transition.
Okay.
So you grew up almost your entire life with it.
exactly. So like I just grew up like identifying as Mennonite in a lot of ways. Like even though I knew I wasn't culturally Mennonite, like I believed in a lot of the principles. I still do. I like Mennonites have like a very specific type of food, like comfort food, and I love the food. We have a local restaurant here that, oh, the food there is to die for. Like I'm just thinking about it now, and I'm really hungry.
Okay, wait, give me some examples. I want to hear.
Yes.
What kind of food?
What kind of food? And
I love food.
Was it all homemade, I assume,
Yes.
or what was that like?
Okay, so good example is like chocolate peanut butter pie. It is like this chocolate pie, like pudding pie, and then like they take peanut butter and like kind of turn it into, I want to say they use some sort of graham cracker maybe. I don't know exactly how this is done, but they like roll that in the cracker and like sprinkle it up on top and put it in the middle, and oh my goodness, it's amazing.
Oh, it sounds so good.
I'm hungry now. That sounds great.
I know. And then there was this is a funny story. So Amish peanut butter, my Amish have like this stereotype of being like super healthy because a lot of them are very thin because they work outside a lot and are in construction a lot of the time, and are much more agrarian.
Right.
So my mom like got into this habit of eating a lot of Amish peanut butter because a friend made it, and she's thinking like, oh, this is healthy, it's fine, it's Amish. And then she started noticing she was actually gaining weight from eating this. And so she went to the friend's daughter and was like, hey, how does your mom make this? Like, what are the ingredients? And one of the main ingredients was marshmallow fluff.
Really?
That does sound good, though. Oh my word!
Very,
so they mix.
very creamy.
Wow,
growing,
that makes sense why it's so good then, right?
Yeah, growing up, my mom, she would make a peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwich. Yeah, on just like good old white bread, right? Like white bread, peanut butter was like fluff on the other, and it was so good. And so I'm like, I can already like imagine what that mixture tastes like, because I think that's kind of what was on my sandwich.
I have a kind of a random question, but because you brought up the Amish, I assume people want to know. I want to know. Growing up Mennonite, what did you think about the Amish? Were they the crazy people over there that are living a different way, or were they just like, you know, that those are cousins practically? Like, what was that like? The view on the Amish?
A lot of times, for a lot of people, they are cousins, actually. So a lot of Amish and Mennonites are related. If a lot of Amish, if they choose to leave the Amish lifestyle, become Mennonite, it's like kind of a segue in some ways.
Because the Amish are a lot more strict in a lot of things, right?
They
like
are. So
use of technology and stuff.
Yes, use of technology, and then also they have a different government system in some ways. So in the Mennonite church, the pastor and like the elders don't really have a dictate on your life and your community as much. With the Amish community, that's very different. Like each church is like its own town and government system and kind of has its own rules. And this is speaking generally. I'm not Amish. I can't speak fully on their behalf, but that's the gist of it. And I'm sure like there will be a former Amish person who will correct me on here. But basically, what it boils down to is with Mennonites, generally speaking, the pastors don't have nearly as much control over their congregates' personal lives and like rules as Amish bishops do.
I see. So
sounds kind of like FLDS, you're the Amish, the LDS are the Mennonites, and when you go from FLDS to LDS, you feel like it's like a huge like liberation.
I felt like
right?
I had all the freedom in the world going from something so extreme as the FLDS. So I wonder if that's, like you say, similar.
It probably feels similar for people, like you said, if they're leaving the Amish and then they go to being Mennonite, they probably feel a sense of a lot of freedom.
There is. Well, and it's also kind of does depend on the Amish group, because there are some groups who are a lot more liberal about technology than others.
Oh.
Like one thing about the Amish, at least in my area, generally speaking, is that they're very business. There's like a big gap between how they conduct business life and how they conduct personal life. So more technology is allowed when it is required for the success of a business.
I see.
But there is, like, generally speaking, a pretty firm, like, there's business and there's your personal life. You can have, like, for example, they may have like a cell phone for work purposes, but they get home, that cell phone is not what's going with them.
Sounds familiar, huh, babe?
Yes, it does. So as far as because some of these documentaries we have seen about the Mennonites, actually, that they wouldn't drive their own vehicles, but it was okay to ride in a vehicle as long as they weren't the ones driving. Was that the case that you grew up in as well, or did you have the vehicles you wanted?
Yeah, we I can't think of any church in my area that would have had that rule. Maybe one, but yeah, my area, like, we all drove cars. My dad is a car lover. His dad was a mechanic. He's a mechanic.
Okay.
Both my brothers love cars. Like, cars are a part of our heritage in some ways. So
that explains then why so many people commented after we did a review on that documentary, saying that that was a very unique group of Mennonites. That all Mennonites are not like that at all, and that's good to know. And so that was kind of news to me. I guess there's a lot of groups that are completely different from that one we watched.
You see that more with Amish for sure. Like in our area, we know when it's an Amish group, because there will be like a particular white van that you see, and you'll see all these women in their bonnets and then these men with their beards, and they're like all piled up, like 12 of them in this one van, driven by someone who very clearly does not look like them. And so, that's in my area at least more common of the Amish than of the Mennonite. I will say that, like, with more conservative Mennonite groups, that would be the case. I see a lot of more conservative Mennonite women, like fully decked in their dresses and then riding bikes, and I'm like, power to ya.
Yeah. I know how that feels. I would see the women in the FLDS community, even swimming, they would be fully dressed in their dresses, everything, braids in their hair. So some people take it to an extreme.
So what was a typical church service like? What did your day look like on a Sunday?
So we go in and we have Sunday school. Children are divided by grade or age group. And then up until middle school, then we had like our own middle school group and then high school group. And then adults kind of had their choice of what Sunday school services they chose to go to, or Sunday school classes. There are some things that are divvied by age group a little bit, like if the class is specifically concerning like what it looks like to be getting older, then maybe older generations will gravitate towards that. If we're doing particular studies on like books of the Bible, you'll see people from a lot of different age groups together on those. And then after Sunday school, which is about an hour, we'd have service where everyone gets into the sanctuary. We start with some music. We do announcements, prayer requests, and then tithes and offerings where we pray over those and just generally pray. More music, like 3 or 4 songs. And then when we're done, we go into sermon time, and that whole sermon and like sanctuary church service process is about an hour to an hour and a half. And then everyone, a lot of people, I know in a lot of churches it's not uncommon, like service ends and everyone just heads out the door. In our service, we'll have like people slowly leaving, but more often than not, we have a lot of people who are talking afterwards, getting to catch up on each other and like be like, how's your sister doing? How's your daughter doing? Do you need this or that or the other? Seeing what events are going on. I used to, my little brother and I used to get so frustrated with my dad because he would talk and like talk so long that the lights would be turned off, like after and he'd still be talking to a friend and we're like, Dad, it's lunchtime, we're hungry, we are starving, we are going to die. I joke all the time that my dad is gonna like pause the rapture because Jesus is gonna be up there like, it's time to go, and he'll be like,
well, I mean, I can imagine it was an opportunity for the community to catch up, and like you said, it was almost like a family reunion once a week.
Yes.
Because everyone knew each other or were related. So back to your service. So after Sunday school, y'all meet for your main service. Was there a lot of music and singing, or was it just because I know that some groups, we heard anyway, some groups didn't use instruments like a piano, and it was just this singing a cappella. What was it like in your service with the singing?
In our service, there was instruments. I think, I'm not for sure on this, but I feel like when our church was like back in maybe the 60s, 70s, I could be wrong here, there was a debate on whether or not instruments were allowed. We do have hymnals, and every so often we'll pop them out and use them. We don't use them very often though. Majority of the time it's with instruments. I'm sure there are churches that don't use instruments, but the majority of the ones I can think of do.
Guitar and other instruments like beyond just a piano or an organ?
Yes, yeah, we don't have an organ. We just have a piano, guitar, drums, bass. Like,
you're having a good time in there, it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jealous. I grew up with just piano or organ.
Piano or organ, that's it.
Sometimes someone would get to bring in a violin, and we were excited for that, but that was about it. There was no guitars, no. One time my brother did get permission to play guitar. I think it was at his homecoming from his mission, but it was a huge deal, and it had to be acoustic and very soft.
Yeah, very rare. So
very, very rare. It had to always be very, very solemn, very reverent music.
The idea of having drums in church is just out of this world.
It excites me. I feel like we need to go and experience that.
Yeah.
Neither one of us
live stream every week. I can send you the link.
Please do. Yeah. Seriously, I'm like, I need to. I love music, and I feel like I would totally dig getting.
Missed out on some of the exciting music. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I had a question about the sermons. So were the sermons always given by the pastor, or did members of the congregation give sermons as well?
So with the sermon, mainly the pastor. Right now we have a larger church, so we have 4 pastors now, and so we have a main pastor who does the majority of the sermons, but sometimes our other pastors will teach. So every so often we'll have guests come in who speak on what's going on in their world. Like every so often we'll have some guest pastors come in and speak, or we send out a lot of missionaries. So if they come back, sometimes they'll give like a whole sermon like on their experience in the mission field and what was going on. Sometimes we'll just have a little like 10-minute thing where missionaries will come and discuss what's going on with them.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions about missionaries now, but before we get to that, to stick with the meeting here, I just had a question. Did you partake of the sacrament or the breaking of bread and wine, any of that kind of thing?
Yes. So,
Or I guess I should say, do you? Or did you, do you, either way?
yeah. So we eat of the bread and drink of the cup, which is like a piece of bread and grape juice. We don't do wine or water. It's grape juice for us. Maybe somewhere they do water or something else. I don't know. That's just what we do. We don't do it every time. Every sermon, we try to keep it. Our church, it's very important to keep communion special. So we call it communion. We do not see it as a sacrament or like a requirement for salvation necessarily, as much as a very, very important symbolic gesture showing how much God loves us and how important it is to remember the sacrifice that Jesus took for us. And so we don't believe in things like transubstantiation. We don't believe that it actually becomes like the blood and body of Christ. We just believe that it is a good way to remember the sacrifice that Christ did for us and like how much God loves us.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Very cool.
So, well, thank you for answering that question. And now to the missionaries.
Wait, I have one more question before missions. Sorry, I'll make it fast though.
Go ahead.
Okay, with 4 pastors, when you say you have a large church, about how many people is that?
400, 500 per service.
Okay, wow. Okay, yeah. That's all. I was just trying to like wrap my head around.
That is a lot.
Comparing, obviously, to myself and what a congregation looked like and how many people were in church and stuff. So I was just curious. You know, that's such a relative number.
A lot too. So growing up, I would say it was closer to 200, 300, which was still sizable. But in recent years, we've seen a lot of growth and been really blessed by that. And plus, like, our church takes be fruitful and multiply very seriously. So we have a lot of children.
Okay. So I'm guessing no contraception?
Oh yeah, we definitely like believe in that. And
okay. But just encourage to have bigger families. That's how it is with the LDS. Like you can have contraception, but definitely encourage to be fruitful.
Yeah. Okay. And like we definitely like one thing that's very common in our church is adoption and fostering. That's just something that's always been modeled in our church. It's not necessarily like a requirement or anything, but it's a lot of people do it. And so we've always seen like, even if you don't have the ability to have kids, you can adopt, or we have a lot of people who have their own like biological children and then later on choose to foster and adopt. So we have a lot of kids coming in that way too, which is great.
That's awesome.
And is having lots of children more traditional or doctrinal for you?
More just traditional. You know, back a lot of Mennonite and Amish background was very agrarian and agricultural, like working farms and all that. So people had a lot of children back then because you need a lot of help.
That makes sense.
Now I would say like we have like people will have 3, 4, 5 kids because that's just what you do. Some people have more, some people have less. I have none, like, and don't plan on having any. So, you know, it's always like whatever God blesses you with and calls you to do, like, is up to you and between you, God, and your family. But yeah, it's just kind of like traditional to have.
Okay. Like, yeah, like you said, Melissa, that sounds similar to like the LDS.
The LDS, they adopt. I mean, they had their own adoption agency for a very long time as well. So very big into adoption and all that good stuff. But anyway, I'll let you get to your mission questions because I know you have a lot.
Well, first of all, I had no idea that the Mennonites or I don't know about Amish either, if there are missionaries. I didn't know anything about the missionary work. So I would just love to hear more about what that entails. Is it required? Is it just something you volunteer for? What is missionary work?
Do you move away? Is it local?
Yeah.